Okay, well, here we go. This is our refresher course, and I want to thank Chaplain Betsy because she really kind of was the impetus for this. As we are called upon to do more and more of these diffusings and sometimes debriefings, it's good to just reconnect and touch base and get a refresher to make sure we're all on the same page. And yet we also realize that not all of us are trained at the same level. So what I want to do is I'm going to be sharing off and on the PowerPoint that I did send to you. And you have this, you can refer to it. So I'll make reference to this. But I do want to point out, and this was just updated today, because we sent that link, and part of that was to find out who's actually completed the group crisis course. And the people on the left are actually approved to do diffusings. If you're on the right, you're actually not approved to lead a diffusing until you've gone through this course, the full group crisis course, which this is part of it. And this refresher doesn't really satisfy the requirement because we do want to walk through and do a lot of scenarios, have you practice. We'll be offering this training again, but it's and some of you have been leading diffusings and debriefings, and we found you had never taken the course. So we'll have to work through some of that with some more coaching because the standard does want to make sure we're all doing the appropriate steps. So you have that on the left. I'm going to be putting together.
I've actually gone through it, I think, twice, if not 3 times. So maybe
I know. I'll make that note, but you didn't note that on your.
That's why I said I probably missed that on the.
Okay. Well, I'll make note of that because it can only go from what was in print for us. But thank you for that update.
And same with me, Mickey. I went through the rock one with you.
Okay. Again, you didn't note that. You just said you had your seminary training. So that I have to. That's what this is based on, and that's why we're having this conversation. So I appreciate these updates. Now, this is going to acquaint everyone why the process is important, so we'll walk through this. Now, Chaplain Larry Briggs is also a trained trainer for ICISF. So, I'm trying to work with the Fire Foundation to put together another training so we can get they want the peer support training again for families, and then a group crisis. We actually have some other departments that are wanting to get this training. Our challenge is we can't do classes yet in groups, so we're finagling through that. There are things opening up over the next 21 days. Things are being evaluated. For example, at the Rock Church, we're actually not opening our church for over 21 days. We're just going to continue online, just stay within the boundaries because you can't have groups over 100. So, but classes are an option. So at the Rock, we're waiting 21 days before we do classes again. So I'll be working with the fire department and the Fire Foundation to get a course sponsored to try to get everyone on board for this. There are some online courses through ICISF, but I don't believe they have the group crisis one because you need to do a lot of scenarios. So we'll be trying to update you on this. So that's our list that we have for now. Now, just so we're all on the same page, and I'm going to go in and out of this. If you can pull up your PowerPoint so you'll be able to follow along on this as well. When I go out of the Zoom call, just you can have that PowerPoint to refer to. But here are the major incidents within our policy. I'm not going to read them all to you, but these are the incidents where we would want to do diffusings and debriefings, and they've been pretty consistent in engaging, especially I think significant events involving children, the more severe events. It's highly recommend, and the protocol is really what the management is doing is just sending out all hands on deck, and we get it in, zip it. Hey, who's available to do a diffusing? We have a lot of people responding, which is great. But we're going to be having a distinction of those who are fully trained to make sure that the diffusings are within the protocol. So of trained individual. Now, Jerry, I'm going to work with you on this because I know you've done a lot. You have a lot of experience in leading diffusings and everything. So we're going to try to get you through some extra training for this purpose. So now let me I kind of get out of this for a second too. Yeah, if Dana and Rusty, send me info just in the chat that you've done the group crisis. That way I have that information just as a reminder. I do want to, walk through some of this material a little more quickly because we're going to get to the heart of things. But the tactical elements of CISM, just so you all understand that some of the pre-incident education, the assessments that are done are all part of what we call critical incident stress management. Pre-incident education, the training, assessing the nature of the incident, and then strategic planning where, hey, what events do we need to send people? Who should we send? Should we send a peer? Is focus going to be part of the link to these, strategic events that we're going to provide diffusing and debriefings? And what support services are we going to engage on scene? And then we have what are referred to as RITs, or Rest Information Transition Services Information Groups, Crisis Management Briefings. We're not going to be addressing those today, but specifically looking at diffusings and debriefings. And then our support services, our referral is always going to be focused, just keeping that in the forefront. And so we're all familiar with focus. Dave Bond is on the call with us. There are times he leads the diffusing or debriefing. He's trained in this. But at this point, I'm going to play a video just as an introduction. I'm also going to be sending you this link. You don't have to write this link down, but I just want you to see I'm going to be sending this link to you. It's a YouTube link that has kind of an introduction by Jeff Mitchell. So I'm going to share the video. I have to turn my volume down because when you play a video, it sometimes gets real loud. So I apologize. Shout out if it's too loud or if it's too low and you can't hear me. Can't hear the video, but here we go. Oops. Can you see what is CISM and CISD? How are they related? Is that up on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Incident stress management, CISM, is a comprehensive, integrated, systematic, multi-component approach. There's a lot of pieces to it. If you think of it in terms of the word strategy is the big picture. The tactics fit within it. So it's a comprehensive program. It has beginning, middle, ending, has things done before people get traumatized, like education, has things done while they've been traumatized, like on-scene support services, and it has things that we do after people have been through a traumatic experience. And the people we're talking about are emergency personnel. After a traumatic experience, we provide individual support, family support, we provide group support, and we also provide organizational guidance and support so that the organization can help their personnel recover as quickly as possible. To answer the question of what is CISD, we have to start with what is the whole field. The whole field is crisis intervention. There's a large window of all kinds of tactics and strategies that we can use within the field of crisis intervention. Smaller, is critical incident stress management. That's more specific to what we do with a firefighter, paramedics, police officers. So it's much more specific. And then within that larger field of critical incident stress management are individual tactics that we use. One of those tactics is critical incident stress debriefing, which is a structured group intervention after a tragedy to help units respond to it and recover and get themselves restored to unit cohesion and unit performance. That's the main focus of what we do with critical incident stress debriefing. And there's many, many other tactics within the CISM field. Critical incident stress debriefing, also known as CISD, is a group support process. It is not therapy. It is not designed as a cure. It's really designed for two main reasons. One is to restore people in a group, that is usually firefighters or police officers or paramedics. People in that group, restore them to the usual function and to help with restoration of unit cohesion. The reason we do this is because when people have been exposed to a traumatic experience, they tend to separate out and they hunker down. They kind of cut everybody else off. They think they're the only ones going through things. And the group process helps people to understand, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one going through this. My buddies are going through it. And if we can go through this together, then we can recover together faster. CISD differs from other types of tactics in that, first of all, it's focused around a group. And it's got to be a group that's had a roughly equal exposure to the traumatic event. And the other thing about it is that it's designed to enhance recovery. But there are times when we need to do other things, one-on-one or family support or whatever. But this critical incident stress debriefing is designed mostly to support people after they've been traumatized, roughly same exposure to trauma, but they have to be a homogeneous group in order to be able to use the process. Critical incident stress debriefing is not for the fire victim, the person who got burned. It's for the firefighters who have care for and transport that person. It's for the secondary folks. It is not a therapy. It's not a cure. It will help to restore people to their normal functions, get them back on a job, keep them healthy, functional, and able to go on and do the next job.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop this at this point because I'm going to encourage you, as I send the link as a review, for you to actually watch through this. If you have not completed group crisis intervention, this will be a good place for you to start to get some background, to understand the nature of where this fits in. And so with that, let me get back to our PowerPoint here to kind of walk through some of this material for us. Let me get this up on the screen. So I'll send you this link after we're done. And just again, so we're all on the same page to understand that, you know, within CISM, as he drew that picture, there's a lot of different elements to it. There's individual crisis intervention. There are other larger group, what are called RITs and crisis management briefing. But today we're focusing on, as a refresher, for the diffusings and the debriefings. There's also strategic planning, and that's what we do hopefully as an event occurs, that we look at what would be the most appropriate support services, whether to do a diffusing, one-on-one, peer support, family support, all of those different elements, and then ongoing resilience. Now, remember this from the class, these are now considered the core elements of critical incident stress management: strategic planning, informational groups, that's going to be where you talk to people and not letting them share, you're providing them stress management information, and then interactive groups, which are going to be diffusings and debriefings. And then we're always assessing, because you want to see those that are having a stronger reaction, that we want to make sure they or encourage them to connect with focus. We also have individual psychological first aid, or also peer support, or chaplain support, one-on-one chaplain support, and then different elements of building resilience. So have some other information here that's kind of reviewing these. The core elements of CISM really are focused on assessing people, triage of people in the crisis, listening skills, providing information, interaction groups, strategic plannings, and then building resilience. Now, I want to help everyone understand these core elements. This chart really helps explain and group why or where is a diffusing, why a diffusing. Now, and again, I know this is review for many of you, but for some this may be new. There's two types of large group interventions that we do. There's informational and interactional. Informational, that's going to be large groups that there could be, like at a school shooting, there's police, there's fire, there's community members, teachers, school administration. You know what? We can do large group intervention, but it's informational giving. We provide self-care, updates on the event. And so those things, that's referred to as a crisis management briefing or a CMB. And then for operations, large scale events, fires, where people have been on a 12-hour rotational shift and they're going off duty for 12 hours, coming back to a search and rescue situation. That's called a Rest Information Transition Services, or RITS. As they're going off duty, there's maybe a 15-minute gathering, provide refreshments, update on the event, and then stress management, things to consider. What we're talking about today is going to be the more interactional, where we actually get the crew that was involved in an incident together, and they all have experienced something similar. So it's a diffusing or a debriefing. So there's informational and interactional, but then there's also heterogeneous and homogeneous. The heterogeneous, that's you got community members, teachers, administration, firefighters. Those are done in larger auditoriums, which of course we won't be doing this year. And then the homogeneous are people that have all been involved in the same experience there. And sometimes, what about police and firefighter? They actually can be separate homogeneous groups, different culture. They were involved in the event in a different manner. Though at times it's possible to bring in police officers with firefighters, but generally you handle them separate, and that's how our departments have been handling them. So now, just as quick review, the informational are rest information transition. That's the RITS. And then the crisis management briefing. RITS used to be called demobilization, but that had a relationship to military, and different organizations had different understanding of that. So now within ICISF, it's just RITS. So RITS and CMB. Heterogeneous groups would be handled by them. Now, homogeneous, that's going to be diffusings and debriefings. This is, as Dr. Mitchell said, it's going to bring the group back together, group cohesion. Now, types of groups, of course, we're dealing with firefighters, very homogeneous, where they're on the event together, but even within the event, there's different levels. Those that directly handled the individual or the child that were in, or were providing mouth-to-mouth, or, the breathing for the individual. And then those maybe further out that were out at the engine, they weren't directly involved. They're all part of the call, but there'll be different levels of how they engage the event. Now, what we're going to do is, and again, I don't think this will take the full hour. We're going to just walk through diffusing, the steps of diffusing. This was actually part of the class you've been through. And this is just a good familiarization, good overview. I'm going to cover some of the important elements, distinctions, things that are important to say. But it's important to take the full course, because what's essential is that we do a number of scenarios. You actually practice this, supervise, and then to go along, it would be good that things are managed. If you haven't led a diffusing or haven't led a debriefing, it would be best to come alongside a trained person who's experienced, that you're part of the support to the group, but you're observing and walking through the process. And so some of you are very experienced in this and have done quite a number of these, and you've been trained. We'll be identifying you as leaders to model how to do the process. And some of you have had training but have never led one, never led a diffusing or a debriefing. We want to recommend, before you just jump right in and start leading, that you sit through a process and observe how it takes place. This process, number one, it works. It's very organized. There are little nuances how things happen, but generally the group responds naturally through the different phases. Sometimes in a debriefing, it moves more quickly to some of the more third or fourth phase of the process, and sometimes you take more time in the reaction area. People are really processing this, so want to keep that in mind. So let me walk through the diffusing with you. Again, this is a small group, very homogeneous, all the people involved in the event, which could include dispatch, because they are involved in the event and they have information that will benefit the rest of the group because they're part of the call. We've had, Joe has done some diffusings with just dispatch themselves, and that's appropriate as well, to diffuse just a group of dispatchers and how they were processing an event. Generally, a diffusing is done same day. The crew goes out of service and we get there quickly to process. Sometimes we're at the station before the crew is even returned. So at that point, the timing is right after an incident. Generally, after the next day, a diffusing isn't going to be as dynamic as would a debriefing. If it's a significant event, we'll explain why. Again, the group must be homogeneous. Other services that could help would be peer support, one-on-one, a chaplain, one-on-one, or even focus, where personnel is encouraged to make an appointment with focus. Now, the advantage, I mean, their emotional guard is down. Sometimes the emotions are high, but it helps the brain process things as they're going through. It helps for group cohesion. They're all part of the same event. It helps to normalize when you realize you're not the only one thinking these things or processing it. So that is some of the powerful aspects of a diffusing. And a lot of times, a diffusing is all that's needed. If people address it, they walk through the event, not engaging deeply in the emotion. We provide kind of self-care, educational pieces, critical incident stress management. They're good to go. Sometimes, when it's a more severe event, we had that murder-suicide down in South County. We did a diffusing, a debriefing, and then a follow-up group, just group care interaction as well, because it was very significant in how it impacted that crew and what they were exposed to. Now, it's very appropriate in some of these difficult cases, exposure where there's very traumatic and emotions are high, to do a diffusing. And just as the word says, diffusing, it's like letting off some steam, connecting, helping people begin the process, walking through what they experience. And then in a day or two, or their next go around, or their next shift, having them go out of service either at the beginning of the shift or sometime early on to do a formal debriefing. Now, again, it needs to be homogeneous, shared history. They've experienced the same event. So here's the goals of a diffusing. Again, same day, generally within just hours of the event of what they went through. It's going to help reduce symptoms. It's assessing how they're doing as individuals, as a group, how they're behaving. It's also going to help identify those who might need to be referred to focus, additional events. Now, also diffusing helps the brain begin to kind of organize the experience. The brain seeks to have harmony and order. When things are not in order, the brain is stressing to create meaning. And how do I incorporate this into my worldview? Diffusing is the beginning of that process of helping the brain with a shared event tell the story and providing some education that these are normal experiences and to help prepare them for later self-care. Some of the stress management stuff we do. Some of the don'ts, again, diffusing would generally only be about 30 minutes. We're not doing therapy. We don't go into the deep emotion of the event. That could happen as we're just kind of surfacing, walking through this. Be prepared, because sometimes a diffusing will trigger within an individual. They're going to go deeper into the emotion at that point. What might be important to have one of the peers or the focus personnel that focuses there to just connect with that person individually to help them process one-on-one. Or it may be appropriate to just kind of explore some of those feelings, but try not to go too deep because it's still raw. They're still processing. Generally a day or two later, they've had time to kind of reflect. And when you bring them back together, retell the story, and then visit those emotions, the thoughts are a little better organized. Some of the do's, it's a brief group discussion on a very high level, surface level of what happened. You're going to review what took place. You're assessing the group. Of course, it's run by a trained individual, and then generally, rarely a standalone because it needs follow-up with one-on-one, chaplain follow-up, or peer support would be available. Now, here are the 3 phases of a diffusing. It's just an introduction, having them explore, tell the story, and then stress management education, providing information. That's that. That's why it's like 30 minutes. Introduce the team. Now, it's important that we don't have, 2 chaplains, a member of focus there, and 2 peers. We have 5 individuals to do a diffusing for 5 individuals. That is kind of overwhelming. Really, you only need 1 leader, and then 1 additional person would always be recommended to help with observation. So a team leader, which could be a chaplain or a trained peer or someone from focus to actually lead the event, and then a support person, which could be a chaplain or peer support, or even focus, or Dave Bond, for example, being there as support. So we introduce the team. So if it's a diffusing with 1 crew, you would just introduce yourself. If you're from that battalion, it's a good time for you to connect as a battalion chaplain. If it's out of your battalion, you're doing a diffusing, explain who you are, level of training, all of that, lay out the guidelines. You're going to describe the process. We'll break this down into more detail. And you're trying to lower anxiety about what they're going through. This is not therapy. Then we have them tell the story. You walk through the event, and I'll walk through how to do that. And then the stress management, kind of help normalize, and then give them some guidance for self-care of things to anticipate. Now, again, 3 phases. Phase 1 is introduction. So here, for those of you who have never done a diffusing or observed a diffusing or haven't been trained, you'll see that there's a lot of pieces to it. And these are all very significant and important to walk through and practice and actually experience, because there are certain elements. Now, let me have, I'll stop sharing here. I'm going to have Larry Chaplain Briggs, if you can hold up your cheat sheet cards for everyone. And take your mute off. Why don't you speak a little bit about those? Because if you put your screen on speaker view.
Me? On speaker view? Oh.
If the viewers are on speaker view, he and I will kind of come in and out. So go ahead and talk about those for a second.
Well, in a CISD and defusing, one of the things that builds confidence with your group and comfort is that you're not writing things down. You're not you're not keeping tabs on them. Confidentiality is a big thing, and they want to know that you're focused on them and that. So ICISF put out these little cards. If you can do a diffusing completely through without any crib notes or a CISD, that's excellent. It's not going to happen your first time, I promise, or maybe third or fourth. But it's nice to have these to refer to, because you can just be holding them. It won't bother them. In fact, you can even say, hey, I've got this little, I don't want to lose track of where we're going with this. So you can take comfort in knowing I'm not going to lose track. I have a little cheat card here. But they see that you look at it occasionally, but you're not taking notes. And that gives a lot of comfort. These are not going to teach you how to do CISD or defusing. This is for you, trained up, studied up, you've gone along and you've watched. This just keeps you on track so you don't miss things, which certainly can happen, I promise.
Thank you. They're cheat sheets and very helpful. I've devised my own. I have, certain things I want to emphasize that are beneficial for me, but on a cheat sheet, you'd have a very small, brief review of these elements. So let me kind of walk you through this. And these are key elements when we're leading a diffusing. And again, as a review for all of us. But the wellness department will be calling for a diffusing, ask for someone who's available. They'll give us the logistics and a little bit of background on the event and the nature of the event, hopefully a lot of background and information on the crew, anyone that's been impacted, or some of their, some of the just logistic elements and the nature of the event. So we're prepared ahead of time in our thinking of what we're walking into. Generally, you're going to get at the station, and the crew's kind of meandering about. They may be needing to, of course, get into their Class C or, doing whatever to kind of say, but you're going to give a time. Okay, at 1100, we're going to go ahead and start the diffusing and gather together. You want, it's best to be in a room where you just have chairs in a circle, and we'll walk through why. A lot of times you're going to be stuck in a kitchen and there's the big table in the middle. It's recommended not to have a table in the middle. People kind of hide from it, but I've done numerous diffusings where a table was there and things went well. It's fine. But if you have a spot where chairs can be in a circle, when you have 4 or 5 people, 6 people in a room, generally you can do that. If you go to the bullpen where they have the lounge, the Burka loungers, that's not going to be the best environment. Number one, they're not in a circle, they're facing the television. Plus, people will lean back and kind of there's body language that they can tune out on you. So it would be best to get some of the kitchen chairs, sit down in a circle. But again, it depends on the station. You could even do it in the bay if that's appropriate. But when you start, you start by introducing yourselves and the process. And this is a key point I want you to make note of. Because remember, you may be real experienced in this, it's familiar territory, you know this works and everything, but for some of our young personnel, many of them have never been through this, they don't know what they're part of or why. It's so crucial to give the why behind things. So our purpose is to, this is called a diffusing. It's a short 30-minute conversation that's going to help us walk through this event. This is a very critical event that it's important for us to share the experience together to help connect us with one another and also help us all realize, wow, we're not alone in some of the thoughts we're having or feelings because there's a shared experience. And I generally will always say, you may feel fine that this was not a big event, but something you share could be very helpful for somebody else on this crew. And so that will be kind of the description. And what I will do is say, we're just going to kind of walk through the event, tell the story, and at the end, I'm going to give you some self-care suggestions for stress management. And it's that brief. Now, a key point number 3, provide academic support as to why this process helps. I will always include this as part of my presentation. Let me encourage you, make this an important part. And what I say, and if you've been in my classes before, you'll perhaps remember me saying this. Research says, or studies show, and this is true, especially within emergency response personnel, they're very academic, have a lot of classes, a lot of study, your paramedics, gone through all the medical backgrounds. That provides a level of authority that people are looking for to hang, the why I'm going through this. I'm going to always state, this is not therapy. We're not doing therapy, though we have therapy available through Focus and may be very beneficial. In fact, I would recommend everyone at some point this year to go through a session with Focus to evaluate just how you're doing in your own life stage with relationships, work, and everything. I'll always emphasize that as an important part of just ongoing mental health. But we do want to emphasize this process is not therapy. But I will say, research has given a lot of evidence that what we're doing here today is real important for your ongoing care, your ongoing mental health. This career is exposed to a lot of hazardous things that we see, that the brain has a hard time processing. And so this process, and here's how I word it, this process of telling the story of a shared memory helps the brain integrate a horrible, difficult experience to help connect the story into a meaningful way that can incorporate it within your worldview. It helps the brain normalize this experience to avoid triggers that could happen that are unresolved thoughts, unresolved experiences, the feeling of being uneasy, or some of the sights and sounds that could later come up, which are very normal. But this process helps the brain integrate this experience and to normalize the experience into your worldview. And then I also will repeat several times, research confirms that this process is very helpful. And so you have the academic support, and then the physiology of the brain are important elements to bring in to the discussion. Now, you want to motivate the participants to participate in the sense that something they say may be helpful to others. You're going to set the ground rules, which are turn off the cell phones. This is a confidential meeting. It's not, we're not fault finding or trying to look at this from a response protocol, study. We're just looking at how we're processing this shared experience together. Nothing is written down, as Larry brought out. It's strictly confidential. In fact, I encourage you not to share the experiences of what we talk about with other people. If things are shared in private, that need to be held in private. We're not investigating. No one is forced to speak, and all viewpoints are important. And again, I'll say it's just about 30 minutes. We're going to have this time together. I'm going to give you some other helpful information. And then you just transition. So let's begin. We just need to walk through this event, what happened. And the way I generally will start, I don't know all the details. Could you help from start to finish kind of tie things together, how the call came in, who first responded, and describe the event? And then as a facilitator, I'm asking for clarifying questions. Everyone can share their experiences. I'll be looking for themes and observing behavior to see if anyone needs assurance or probably would need to talk to someone one-on-one or make an appointment with focus, but we just tell the story. And then after we sufficiently cover the whole event, you're observing, you will point out certain themes. You move into the information or educational part where you're going to acknowledge and normalize what they've gone through or what they can expect to go through. I always have my stress management sheet that will give some of the signs and symptoms. We also have the referral information for focus on there and other support care. Going to encourage them to take care of themselves, exercise, to burn off some of the stresses of the adrenaline, connect with roommates or family when they get home, and talk about reconnecting at home. If something is going to be on the news, significant event. Now, each EMS worker has different agreements with their spouse. Some spouses, they don't want to hear about it. You leave it at work, so they need to have people in their life that they feel comfortable. Generally, it's going to be the peers or people they work with that they can talk with. And other family members, when you get home, I want to hear everything, and it provides that additional support. That's the basic elements of a diffusing. Again, there's the introduction, the exploration, and information. So let me pause here. Let me just kind of get out of this. And now any other input, maybe things I've left off just about diffusing. Any questions, any experiences, anything you've had that you felt should be added in here? Kevin.
Not so much an experience. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah.
Not so much an experience, but Mickey had a sheet that very similar to those cards that Larry held up. You have to join ICISM to get those. But we do have, let me get it to the camera. I made up the cards. Basically, this was something Mickey had, and I just stole it. But it has defusing on one side and debriefing on the other. This fits in my day planner, so I think a few of you got these. Betsy, I think, got them.
Can you email it out to everybody?
I'd be happy to do that. These are laminated. If you don't have access to a laminator, let me know and I can get it squared away for you.
So Mickey, I remember one time you had mentioned that whenever there are two people at the diffusing, it's always good for the one not speaking to keep an eye on the room and see if you notice any changes, any issues that you might be able to address later, or kind of concerns. And so that's something to remember.
Yeah, and you're working as a team. One person's leading, the other person's supporting, and both of you are observing. And we'll get to the seating arrangement in a little bit, so make sure that we can all see where people are at. So, good point. Other
Hey, Mickey, I got something to add, if I could. If we have dispatchers there, I usually like them to start, and it kind of leads naturally into then the progression of the call. So a lot of dispatchers have been involved in diffusions lately, and it's really good for them to start with the first contact with the patient or with one of the ERPs, and usually works out really well that way.
I would actually second that as well, Mickey, being part of a diffusing and debriefing, not only in the or leading and supporting role, but also being one of the dispatchers who has been through diffusing and debriefings. It is very beneficial to be able to talk with the other people who are there to actually hear the rest of it, because we don't get closure on half of what actually happens.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. The call does start with dispatch, and so if you're starting start to finish, now if a dispatcher is not part of the diffusing or debriefing, I'm still going to bring in how did the call come in, because some of the stresses actually relate to how the call came in, where it was a CPR and they're en route to the place. And then right before they arrive, they get more detail, and it's an infant. For some reason, it wasn't coming out as a pediatric call. Because as responders, you're preparing what you're going into. And the shock of not being prepared does disorganize the brain. So most of the calls are obviously starting with dispatch. So that information is always going to be crucial. Rusty.
Yeah, I don't remember if it's in one of your training or, but like working as a team, as everybody was just talking about earlier, and then what you do if somebody leaves the room. Didn't you give some guidance on that? And secondly, did you have some other examples of clarifying questions to get more interaction from the rest of the group when people are being quiet?
Yeah, well, diffusing, again, is not going to be going into depth. We'll get into some of the clarifying questions in the actual debriefing part. But generally, I'm just asking questions to try to understand the nature of the event. Because again, you're just assessing how difficult this call was. You're also assessing, should we make recommendation that they do a debriefing at their next shift. So a lot of what we're doing as they're telling the story, you're going to see them reacting. I think Kevin was with me on it was a suicide in a canyon, and the parents ended up being there. They were very emotional and everything. But what was most frustrating for the crew was having to travel half a mile through brush and everything. And one of the things I asked them on a scale of 1 to 10 on the impact, the emotional impact of this suicide, how does this rate? And every one of them was like, it was a 1, it was a 2, 1. It didn't impact them at all. That right away gave me a perspective. Oh, this is okay. They're kind of normalized on the suicide, though there was a EMT that was there that I think said, well, this was a 6 or a 7. And the whole crew rallied around that person to help them. That's normal. You're young. You're just starting out. So, Kevin.
I've had several incidents, though, and that was one of them, where the captain, usually, who was an old school captain, started things off by telling everybody at the table it wasn't no big deal. It was just another call.
Yeah.
And there were people at the table to who it was a big deal. How do you
which did come out? Yeah, and that again, you in your leading diffusing or debriefing, number one, which I was going to get into in the debriefing piece, we don't allow rank in, though I have at times. because it was appropriate, and the crew actually wanted the BC in there because the BC was part of a call. They loved the BC, was part of their like family orientation. So, but generally, a BC is going to be not part of the intervention because they may be on their panel for promotion someday, and if they show emotion, that would be seen as something that's weak, and so there may not be as open and vulnerable. You're going to have people that tend to sabotage, where again, old school, or they may make comments, when are we going to be done with this? And so there are ways to handle that. Again, if there's two of you in there, and if someone is very aggressively sabotaging this, you can say, well, Captain, seems like you've been through a lot of these yourself. You know, I'm going to probably excuse you. Why don't you go hang with the peer, and you guys can have some kind of fellowship time while the rest of us kind of work through this. You can dismiss someone out of the room with one of the other individuals with you if they're aggressive, or you can anti-sabotage by, you know, this may not seem like a serious call to you, but suicide is very serious, and the brain is not designed to see this on an ongoing basis. And so we need to help walk through this process for everyone. And Captain, even for you, you know, if we're getting pretty numb to suicides, that, you know, this could be a sign we need further investigation on this, or further experience walking through this process. So again, anything can come from left field, right field, and that's where you've got to be quick on your feet to try to take the tone of what's going on in the room. And
so along those lines, Mickey, you were going to respond to my question about somebody leaving the room?
Oh, yes, thank you. Well, when someone is not just leaving the room, they may be emotionally feeling uncomfortable. When you and I generally will work with a peer, hey, you sit by the door. If someone needs to get excused, or they're feeling uncomfortable, or they bolt for the door, you need to get up and go with them. And that's part of the normal process. So in that situation, you'd be on your own. I was doing it was actually a debriefing, and someone was sabotaging the whole experience. I don't see why we're wasting time doing this. You know, and when I was in the department, I never had stuff like this, and I'm okay, you know. And I said, well, and I dismissed them and had the peer that was with me walked out with them. And, you know, I handled the group alone. And I even addressed it to the group. You know, I said, you know, sometimes some of the old school is tough up. If you can't handle this, get another career. But some of that mentality is just not healthy. And people are on their third marriage, drinking heavily, and have a lot of anger issues and struggling with rage. But I'm dealing with this just fine. No, we're not designed to walk through this stuff like this. And so this whole process, again, studies are real clear. This process helps the brain integrate this information and helps to normalize it, so I don't later have triggers that will come back and impact me. Okay, let's, Larry, one more, and then we'll get into the debriefing.
Real quick, are you flexible on bumping the diffusers up to 3? Only because of the situation that was brought up. If one has to leave, then there's only one person in the room with them. And the other thing is, if we're trying to get people who have not done debriefings or diffusings to have access to them and see them, would it be okay to do a 3-person one, or does that get a little too clustery?
It depends on the size of the group. If you have 3 people in a diffusing and 3 of you, it kind of becomes too much, you know. But if you have 4, 5, 6, having a third person, if you have an observer, what you do as part of the introduction, say, hey, Chaplain Paul is here. He is going to be a future lead for this process. So he's in training. He's just observing for the benefit of this process. And so that's part of the introduction. So they're not necessarily part of the inner circle. But they may still contribute because they may see things or bring up things. But generally, they're going to be asked to be more passive, to just observe the process and how it goes. So early on, the wellness department was sending, 2 peers, 2 chaplains. It was kind of overwhelming. So, and finding that really we don't need to send a whole crew. It's more small because we're dealing with generally 4 or 5, sometimes 6 or an 8. Now, larger events, of course, you're going to have a larger where you have multiple stations. Then you're going to have a need for a lot more people participating around the room. So again, it depends on the nature of that. And that's what strategic planning is all about. Early on, the way things worked is an incident occurred, wellness contacted me. I evaluated with them, hey, this is what I'd recommend and the nature of this type of call, how many people involved, how many people send. But of late, they've just been dispatching, zip it, hey, we need crew. So I haven't been involved in any of the strategic planning. So that's still a conversation that we need to have. I think it's beneficial before just sending an alert, zip it, send people, and you have it's all hands on deck. There should be a plan. We need 1 chaplain, 1 peer, 2 chaplains and a peer. We need, focus is going to be here. We need 1 peer, 1 chaplain. So that will be some of the process protocol, I think, would be more beneficial. And then you have someone like, that was doing the on-call because Brent and the whole group were gone. And so one of the peers, who's very gung-ho of the process, he wanted everyone going, for the nature of the call. All chaplains, all peers, show up, So that was hilarious, but we worked through that. Okay, let me get to the debriefing, and then we'll wrap things up. There's a little background on how the process came about. Really started with Jeff Mitchell that you saw. The goals, similar to a diffusing, kind of help normalize. You're going to help group cohesion, identify steps for coping, stress management, and then observation. You're going to be able to see how the group is doing. Minimum 2. Again, same background. And the recommendation, you've got to have the background in training and experience. So generally, you can have a group up to 20. I've done larger with support just because of the nature of the event and what was asked of us. Could last up to 3 hours, depending on the size of the group and the nature of the event. Timing within 10 days can still be impactful. Generally, it's going to be a day or 2, maybe 3 days after. If it's a line of duty death, generally you want to do a debriefing after the funeral because of emotions. The funeral is going to be part of the processing. Prior to that, it'd be a lot of one-on-ones with peer support chaplains connecting with the crew members. So you want a convenient time. It's not having people stay over on their shift because they want to get home. Where it's at the end of a shift, okay, you're getting off at 8 a.m. and we want to do a debriefing. And so you're going to keep people over. That would not be conducive to the individuals. All personnel involved should be invited. It's not mandatory. You shouldn't force people to be there that don't want to be there. Should be relieved, taken out of service. Again, homogeneous, and then Here, one team member for every five or six participants would be kind of a guide there. Important considerations, similar, confidentiality, no breaks. So before you start, you say, if anyone needs to use the restroom, please do so now, because we won't have a break, and this may be several hours. Timing of day is important, closed circle format. Ground rules, these similar to a diffusing, but on the cheat sheet, these are important just to kind of read through. Hey, no one's forced. At the beginning, I'll ask everyone to share their name, their role in the event, but once we get into this, you're not going to be forced to share. No, we're not recording, and no note-taking. It's not operational critique, and not a blame session, not therapy, and again, stressing confidentiality. Now, here's the format. You have a door there. If there's two of you, one by the door, and chaplain over here, if that person's leading, will be on the other side. The leader will always be opposite the door, and somebody else near the door who can provide. MHP is mental health practitioner. If you have, 4 people involved, the reason you have us sitting opposites here is so you can observe from different points of view, and then one person by the door. And so as people are sitting in the room, you can all see, half the room, and observe how people are doing. It's recommended to avoid, table in the middle, equipment, things that are distracting. So you focus on just the individuals in front of you. As a summary, here are the 7 phases of a debriefing. Now, if you have not gone through this, these phases happen naturally. Things move at different rates, but it's crucial to be trained to walk through the different phases, because the phases are all important. Now, the power of this event, or this process, has to do with the brain integrating the experience to normalize the story, but to touch on some of the emotions that were experienced and realize you're not alone. The emotion triggers norepinephrine in those events that connect synapses that create memory. And memories can lock on to some of the negative events, very emotionally connecting, that create those potential triggers for later, post-traumatic stress. So as you see this, you're starting here on the cognitive, very intellectual, facts, information, education. So we walk through kind of the more the front part of the brain, and then we get into more the midbrain, and then coming back out, addressing some of the thoughts, thinking, teaching, and then self-care elements. So a diffusing only goes to introduction and more of the facts, and then reentry. So you're only up here in the more cognitive. As you go into the 7 phases, you'll eventually go into the deep elements of affect, or the emotional. And so you have a brief situation review, first impressions, because that will start to get into some of the what's called yuck factor in ICISF, and then things that are most disturbing or causing most distress, and then some of the signals of distress. That's part of the education, and then stress management and recovery. So 7 phases listed there. And again, in the full course, we're going to go in a lot of detail. We walk through how to do introductions, we practice introductions, and then go through different scenarios. So similar to diffusing, I really want to encourage that you share the why behind why we do this. Research supports this. Academic support for this, and how the brain processes this information. So again, you're going to say, we're going to walk through different phases of this experience. and from just how the nature of the event, how it impacted us, how we're experiencing this, and then at the end we'll provide some information just for ongoing self-care. So similar to diffusing, you want to share that this process is going to be helpful for everyone as you have a shared memory. Now, prompt in the fact phase, let me back up. You go introduction, fact phase, thought phase. So they all have different elements as we walk to more emotion or getting to the more emotion. So the first fact phase, after introduction, who's who in the zoo, you tell who you are, what happened from your perspective. Where were you? What was your part of the call? So it's just keeping the cognitive, the prefrontal cortex of the brain. Now, there's an alternative fact phase. I'm going to skip over that. You can refer to that. But eventually, after you go around in the circle, and generally you start in the fact phase, you're going to just, and here's how I do it, and it's appropriate. At the very beginning, I give an introduction, and then in the fact phase, I will actually go around the room and just tell me how many years you've served and what's your role in the fire department. I'm an engineer, 4 years, and I get their name. So I go around the room where everyone just says their name, years of experience, and that. And then the fact phase, I go, well, what was your initial part of this call? Where were you in the call? So in the fact phase, I go around once where they kind of give their name and years of experience. The second, where were you? Then it kind of primes the pump where they go around, and a lot of times they'll just naturally follow and sync. And I as part of the introduction, I tell them no one is forced to share. It's not mandatory, but something you share can be very helpful to other people that are on this call. And so some of your insights going to help the whole group because we have a shared memory. But this process of going around once, then twice, kind of opens it up. Everyone feels more comfortable sharing. Kind of primes the pump. But on the thought phase, this is where I'm not going to go around the room. And I'll even say that, hey, I'm not necessarily going to go around the room and ask each of you on this, but I'd like some of you to share what were some of the first and most prominent thoughts when the call came to mind. Might be how dispatch came in. It might be coming on scene. Might be some of the confusion or lack of information. Any unusual, disquieting thoughts. You'll see this goes from facts to now, gosh, what was I thinking? And this starts to go towards more, it will start to lean into what they were actually experiencing in the emotional or affect. So the reaction phase gets into the more emotion. Now, thought phase, what were some of the most prominent thoughts that entered your mind? What was distinct? What was maybe unusual or disquieting? Or, what were some of your first thoughts? Now, this could lead right into the reaction phase. There's sometimes I go into this and they go right into the emotion, of describing a horrific event. That's okay. You don't have to pull them back out. Hey, we're not supposed to be showing emotion yet. You just go with the flow. But these prompts are very helpful. What was the worst part of this event for you? Now, sometimes it's, if it's a decapitated or an abused child, it's kind of obvious, and I'll say, well, besides the obvious gruesomeness of what happened to the victim, in addition to that, what were some of the worst parts of this event for you? Because they could be as like, are you an idiot? I walked into a room and someone was cut in half. Or I was car accident and their brain was in the middle of the freeway. So you kind of, what was the worst part for you? So you have to kind of ease into that. or any aspect of the event that have caused you to have more distress. Because remember, this is a day or two later, 3 days later, they're going to be able to pull out some of the stuff that's bothering them. If you had the power to erase one single aspect of this event, what would you want to see go away? What were the experience that you wish that you didn't have? And again, I sometimes will give a number just so I know where they're at this phase. I'll say on a scale of the top 10 worst calls, or 10 worst calls you've been on, where does this rank? Does it even rank in the top 10? There was one freeway accident where the crew did a debriefing, and gosh, every one of them, it was top 2 or 3. 1, 2, or 3 of the worst things they'd seen in their whole life. And so I knew, okay, this is significant. And so they're going to need, ongoing support to get through this. Then after you feel that catharsis, there is this, the emotion has come out. There could be crying. There could be, there reaches a point, they're sharing, and there's this like, there's that kind of catharsis. When you see that they've just kind of got it all out, that's where you move to, and this becomes more of educational. You're moving into the symptom phase, because what physical behavior changes have you noticed how this has impacted you? What has life been like since then at home? How has this impacted your home, your thinking? How has this event maybe caused some stress for you? Having them share, I haven't been hungry. I've had headaches. I haven't been able to sleep. Now at this phase, they may not even share anything. And then you would prompt with questions. Have any of you had any nightmares or difficulty sleeping, loss of appetite? These are all normal experience, having been experienced in what you've been through. And so you can throw some of that out there. And again, your cheat sheet, your stress management cheat sheet, will have a lot of those. And again, normalizing that, hey, it's very normal. The brain's trying to make sense of this. And so sometimes there's distresses, feeling uncomfortable, a little agitation, angry, short-tempered. These are very normal reactions because you've been exposed to a very emotionally abnormal event. And that's where you move into the teaching phase, some of the stress management, things to encourage for their ongoing recovery. And again, strongly recommending that they connect with focus, not even just because of this event. This event might be something to encourage you. If you haven't connected with focus, you haven't made an appointment as yet, hey, this might be a good time for you just to check in. Just on your career cycle, this might be an opportunity for you to take that step. And then re-entry, that's at the end where you just lessons learned. What are some of the things that you're going to take with you? What has helped you? What's some encouragement you can share with the group that have helped you in walking through this experience? Some of the things that help you at home, and how you process things like this. Some really great things have been shared. This gets into the post-traumatic growth. What are things that this event is going to encourage you in just your growth? Now, within the briefings you have here, within the phases, the actual objectives, you're going to introduce the team, the process, kind of their first part of how they were involved, the fact phase, thought, what they first thought. It starts to connect the brain to the emotion. Reaction is going to the affect, the emotion, and their reaction. Symptom is going to help them identify feeling within their body, their thinking, their emotions, their social life, help them connect to some of those things that would connect to this event. Then the teaching, education of stress management, and then finally lessons learned. Now, just finishing, CISM, we have what are called mechanisms of action. I think these are important to always review. This is what CISM is all about. This is what the processes help. And again, it's not just debriefing, diffusing. There's all these other elements that as chaplains we're part of, early intervention support, the classes, the, providing information that goes out to the crews for self-care, and then getting there early. That's where diffusings or peer support are very helpful, because research is clear. Early intervention, this goes all the way back to World War I. Getting support early on seems to help people process things better. Now, meeting basic needs, the food, water elements, listening ear, being a liaison to help them connect for a higher level of care, get them talking, cathartic ventilation, group cohesion support, family, providing education, basic stress management, problem solving, conflict resolution, helping them reframe. And then let me finish with this, a worldview. Because you are all chaplains, and in any of the classes that you've taken with me, I'm always going to bring out that 9/11 study that talks about what helped people cope after 9/11. Next to talking, the most significant thing was a person's faith. Okay, this is New England Journal of Medicine, that a person's faith was next to talking. That's what helped them recover the most. Now, as chaplains, we have to be very cautious. You don't come in preaching religion or faith. The wording is going to be, I'm always going to use your worldview. This process helps you organize this event into your life experience and worldview, and that connects to issues of faith. Okay, and that's why chaplains are here, to help you sort out. Numerous studies show that difficult events cause the brain to have to organize things, and if this event doesn't fit into the way I believe the world should work, the brain struggles to create order. For example, children are supposed to outlive their parents. Children are not to be tortured by their parents. Children are not supposed to be having CPR at 6 months old. I mean, those are very real thoughts, that the brain is just, life is not supposed to be like this. And so as chaplains, we come alongside to help sort out those why questions, worldviews. So a key phrase for us to use is, this process is really important to your organization of your worldview, how the world is supposed to be, which connects to areas of belief and faith. And I'm not talking religion. I'll say that to the crews. I'm not talking about religion at this point, or your religious tradition. I'm just talking about what you believe about the world, what you believe about life, that could touch to your beliefs on God. But as a chaplain, I'm not here to preach at you. I'm helping to support you as you process through this. And so those are the language and terminology, because we do have certain personnel sometimes that are very anti-faith, which is a faith and which is a worldview. And so if we come on strong about faith and religion, there's a guard that goes up. But when you talk about worldview, organizing thoughts in the brain, that connects to a person's faith or belief system, that's why we're here to support them. So again, I'm going to open up for more dialogue, questions. We have about 10 more minutes. And I want David Bond to also kind of give some input too, and thoughts come to mind through this, right? Anybody? Well, I'm going to call on Dave. Go ahead, Dave. Unmute you.
Thank you. You know what? I do debriefings and diffusings often for some of the other agencies and the police departments, and this information, I got to tell you, I'm so glad that you let me participate today, because there's things just 2 days ago that I'm all, man, this would have been perfect for that. So thank you. I'm going to continue to utilize that. Funny story, my only funny story that I have of debriefings about antagonists and people that are trying to sabotage a guy. This is with in La Mesa when I was still a cop. I wasn't there, but I was outside. I wasn't one of the peers at the time. But the guy came in and said, I don't want to be here. And this was when he was actually ordered to. La Mesa did order at that time. And so he took his chair out of the circle, sat in the corner and faced the corner for the whole time, the whole debriefing. And even then he said, that was a pretty good debriefing at the end of it. Never said a word, faced the corner. So even though they're not listening, and even though there's anger, that's that secondary emotion. There's normally a lot of fear underneath there. And so keep moving through it. And my takeaway, or maybe a suggestion, would be, if you haven't done these and maybe you're uncomfortable doing them, as soon as you hear one, just show up and be that second chair, and you'll get so much out of it. It'll just be amazing. And so when you have to do it, you'll be much more prepared. I forgot who said it. I think Larry. Man, you want to practice this before you jump in, because a lot of things are going to hit you all at once. But that's the only thing. That's the only two things that I had coming up. I reinforce what Mickey said as far as come on and see us. And if I'm not your cup of tea, there's 12 other ones. Look on the bios at Focus. Most of you, actually, I'm looking around. I think just about all of you were at that meeting, and you walked around. Focus is a little more comfortable for you now, and check in. And it's really more of a chat than anything else. And if something comes up that we need to work on, heck, we'll work on it. If not, it's just more of a kind of check on, canary in the coal mine. If you show up and you start telling me things and what's been going on with you, and I start crawling at the door to get out, that maybe we got some issues. But the vast majority of the time, it's just going to be sharing. And I love how that was said. Sometimes talking, that cathartic, it's just offloading. And we take in so much from these first responders, and some of you are former first responders. We take in so much. If we don't have an outlet, then that we're not firing on all cylinders as well. So strongly encourage us to share. And if not, Focus a trusted spiritual leader yourself, someone that's a really good friend. That cathartic, just offloading, as you all know, is very important. You see people feel lighter after they get done talking with you a lot of the times, and we're all human. So and I guess I'm here as well. I'm really learning. First off, thank you, Mickey. I go back to, I have a whole bunch of notes, and including your thing, and it just makes us all just better at what we're doing on there. But is there any questions from Focus? Anything coming up from Focus that you have? I'm hearing crickets. Nothing but crickets. Mickey?
Okay. There was a question. Well, battalion on Zip It. Kevin, one of the things I'm trying to do whenever I see, because I get a page before the Zip It goes off, and I look up the battalion it's in, make sure, and then what I've been doing is texting the chaplains that are in that battalion and emailing. So Debbie, I know actually Debbie didn't change her name to Dawn. She's using her husband's computer, just so you know that. But Debbie was able to go, which is beneficial. And again, because I asked this specifically if a 2-alarm, an event goes, do you only want the battalion chaplains going? And Brent said, no, any chaplain can go to any event. And so you don't have to hold back. The challenge is we don't want 5, 6 chaplains all showing up at once. So, but generally I don't think that's been happening. So if you want to go to those larger events, especially if you have a dog, I would recommend it. Kevin, you have your hand up?
Well, yeah, that wasn't actually my question. My question was more about defusings. When we get a Zip It page or a page from Brent that says who's available for a defusing, I'd like him to add the battalion to that, because I might be on the bubble and I'll wait and see if somebody else is going to pick it up and go. But if it says that it's a battalion 5, I'm dropping everything and I'm going to go. And so we don't find that out. And I think it would be very helpful to add,
I agree.
available for defusing in.
No, I totally agree. Because that's ideally, that's who I want doing the diffusing. It's the battalion chaplain, because you're going to get to know the crews better. These interventions really build the relationship with the crews, where you're helping them and it endears you to them.
We're not doing the food distribution tomorrow. I tried to call you, I left your voice.
Hey, Mickey, I also second the request for the recording, is I listened to you go through some of the specifics and the specific questions that you asked, and somebody was like, oh man, I love that one, I love that one. And I didn't take a lot of notes because I was just listening. But man, I would love to listen to those types of things over a few times. So if you can get that recording out, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, you'll definitely get the recording. It'll take a little bit because I got to share it with my assistant. She converts it for me. I'm not that savvy in all the computer. Plus, my computer is almost full, so I can't download certain things. So, but I definitely will get that out to you. And I'm going to be talking to Brent too, just about the protocols. I definitely agree that the battalion chaplain should be primary on any requests for diffusings. And I definitely want to try to set up a training as soon as possible. I'm thinking August, we should be okay to be able to start meeting in groups with space and distance and all of that. I have a training for a basic chaplain course coming up in July at the Rock for a basic. And if the challenge, ICISF does not allow us to do any online classes. So I may do my own online class because I have a chaplain training that I do that's not ICISF. I have my own material, so I may do an online class for that if things are going to be prolonged. But we have AMR, different and other departments that are wanting to get people trained. So I think I'm trying to target for August to get something going. And I'll reach out to those of you that have not done the group crisis. Again, this will be, even though you got a little taste of it here, we go into more depth, spend more time, and then we break it down and actually walk through role play, scenarios after scenario after scenario, and you practice. So, but the challenge is you take the class, you go through, I'm good to go, and then it's 9 months before you have opportunity to actually do this. And so that's why it's good before you lead one to sit in on one and observe and have that experience, because the process does work. And the one thing you don't say, got to remember this, when you're leading a diffusing or a debriefing, the absolute one thing you do not say, which most of you should know this, is this is my first diffusing. You don't say that, because then your authority just goes out the door. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Then they're critiquing you. You never say that. Same thing. This is my first wedding. this is my first funeral, because the people you're trying to lead just realizes you don't know what you're doing. So you fake it till you make it. So, and you say, boy, this was powerful. How many of these have you done? You tell the truth and you say, well, as a chaplain corps, we do tons of these. Okay. So just talk around it. So,
hey, so Nick, outside of the classes, the official classes, I was talking to Kevin about this. I've done, I don't even know how many of these, but as it extends time between the last one I've done and now, I'm like, man, is there role playing? Is there training that we can do to come back up to speed so that we don't walk in there kind of stumbling over ourselves? I mean, I like I said, I've done a lot of these, but I feel out of practice. I said, Kevin, let me follow you around for a while. We just need to coordinate stuff like that. But I would like to have, is there a role playing or other kinds of training that we can do outside of the full class?
Yeah, and I think that would take place at one of our quarterly enrichments.
Okay.
Which again, I'll suggest that we can't meet at this point yet on Zoom, so role play wouldn't be good on Zoom. But eventually,
this was a great start, Mickey. I mean, just this review was excellent.
Well, good, and thank you, Betsy, for kind of being the match to get that lit. I know we're all busy, and I take for granted, for everything's going. So, but we're going to be investing in more of these opportunities. So, with that, I'm going to have Larry Briggs give kind of a final word, because he is a trained trainer. And I appreciate his experience. He's done both for police and fire. Any final thoughts, words of wisdom, Larry?
I was thinking about the fact phase and how efficacious it is with normalizing a situation. And I know you've seen it and experienced it. Okay, got it. My wife was just giving me some critical information, so let me finish what I'm saying and bring that to your attention. It's amazing how when firefighters, cops, when we're in this opportunity in diffusing and debriefing in the early end to share what you saw. So many people, like you mentioned, Mickey, what happens when the brain doesn't have the picture, the facts, we make stuff up, not on purpose. It's just what happens. We need to fill the void. And I've seen so many people who were agonizing over something that they think they didn't do well enough, or they should have, whatever. But they had filled it in. It wasn't true. And when a coworker, when that cop next to you, the other firefighter, when they share a factual thing about the event, it clears the air for that individual. They may feel, I didn't do this well enough, or I didn't do it at all, or I messed this up, I screwed that up. And then they find out someone who was right there that saw the whole thing. It's like, no, that didn't happen. You did great. That kind of thing. It's huge. Off topic right now, we have police officers pinned down, gunfire in Minneapolis because of what has happened with the George Floyd situation. So whoever's going to close us in prayer, I would hope that we would include that.
Please do.
All right. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for giving us the ability to feel like this, that your love for us is unmatched and unlimited, and that you've chosen us to be a tool in your hand to help our first responders. We ask right now, Lord, that you would help our first responders in Minneapolis and quell the anger and the angst and the issues going on, Lord. And through that, turn people to you. The people would recognize, Lord, that without God, we are in mayhem. So, Lord, thank you. Thank you for loving us. thank you for, just thank you for loving us, Lord. In your precious name, amen.
All righty. Well, this is going to end our call. I have a lot of stuff to follow up on. I'll be in touch, and I'll be sending you, the link for the Jeff Mitchell piece as well. I encourage you all to listen to that. And Kevin will send out the cheat sheet he has, so we'll support each other like that. All right. God bless you.
Thank you, Mickey. That was awesome.